Thank you. Yes, there's always an irony in talking about more innovative learning environments, but speaking at the front at a crowd like this, but sometimes this is exactly what works best. I will start by acknowledging the work that's been done within ILE+SE, which is probably one of the most ambitious things anybody foolish enough to take this on has taken on. And it is working and it's going well. It's going well because of that map that Julia showed you much earlier, and the hundreds of people who have contributed, not just willingly, but with enthusiasm, to coming to grips with this notion. What is the research agenda we have to move into? What are the critical things we've got to do over the next decade to be able to improve the work we're doing in improving school learning environments? So our first acknowledgement is to the teams and the people. And don't forget, those people also funded. They met the costs of doing this project. Julia spoke to us about the first phase, which was, well, what on earth is going on? It's a baseline type thing. It's good research. But critically, it's from industries and it's from educators and it's from researchers. And those voices are pretty evenly represented. So what I'm going to talk about now is to move on from where Julia finished and say the critical thing that came out of all of the work that we're doing, the mandate that we got given in order to develop further into the second phase from those world experts, was this. The first is evidence. Where is that evidence? For heaven's sakes, compile it, put it together, collate it, organise it, or if we have to, go out and find it. We need the evidence. The second thing is that evidence that we collect has to be relevant. It must focus on all students' experiences. So it's across all different learning environments, from the very traditional through to the most wacky, innovative spaces. But critically, it's all students, because students' voices are difficult to capture, and yet they're the ones who are actually living in these environments and using them. And it's also all students in terms of their intellectual capacities, their physical abilities, their socioeconomic situations, everything. We need all of that. And the third thing, which is a critical thing, and us academics who do research battle with this all the time, it has to be usable. It's nice to collect evidence, but at the end of it, we have to say this now is how we use it to move into the next level of improving our environments. So people want evidence. First of all, I know in Australia, New Zealand, and I think it's the same elsewhere in the world, we are continually getting barraged by people who think that the traditional learning environment is the only way to teach. It works so well for me as a parent, blah, blah. Or we're slipping in the PISA results because we're getting all these flexible spaces. Take us back to the traditional or whatever. We need evidence to actually answer that, because they say to us, the people who want to criticise more innovative spaces, show us the evidence these spaces actually work. So that's one of the things we really have to make sure the evidence we collect is usable to answer the critics. The second thing is it has to be robust. Evidence is so easily pulled apart if it's not shown to be collected in the right way and is reported in the correct way and it's used in the correct way. That's not an easy thing to do. And the third thing is a difficult one as an academic to talk about, because this notion of the cycles of evidence and the cycles of research that's happening. I have a lovely working relationship. Julie and I have just come from Gävle in Sweden, where we're working with Anneli and Jan on a project, and they've got their own group, and they've done a pattern of study over a period of time. And we compared the projects they worked on, and we compared them to the Learn work that's been done. The number of times those projects have been overlapping. They've been the same thing repeated. Why did we do that? We already know that. Why didn't we do our research based on yours to take it the next step? So I've given a couple of talks where I've said, blamed us as an academic group in this field. We don't have maturity yet. We'll only have maturity when we have an organised research agenda that is international in scope, looks across all these variables, builds off each other in a collaborative way. Excuse me. Okay, so how do we get that evidence? We came up with this idea of an evidence database. that what we probably need to do, probably the mandate we've been given, is to build and collate this evidence into one spot that's usable. And we're calling it Argo, for no reason other than we wanted a short name. And it's nice to have it starting with A, because it makes it sound like it's the most important. But we're calling it Argo, and we're certainly happy to change its name if people decide, where's that's got to go. But we are intent on building this database of evidence concerning learning environments. So here's the question, what does this actually look like? I mean, as a practicing teacher, I will say the best way to show something is to show it in action, show it what it looks like. So this is what it would look like in action. The first is we've got us, whether we're somebody in industry, an academic in the university, a teacher in the school, a person in the ministry or in a municipality trying to build schools, there are things we don't know. Where is the evidence on that? So what you would do then, hypothetically, is you would go to Argo and you would put in a request. Please, Argo, what I want to know is X, Y, and Z. What is the evidence out there? What exists that helps us to go to that next stage? When the request goes into Argo, excuse me, Argo, in some way, don't forget this is a work in progress, Argo, in some way, will do an analysis on that. It will pull together all of those variables that are asked and come up with a report or a set of reports or whatever is the correct way to pass that information back under that scenario. And ideally what happens then, that allows the person to make, or the people, or the group, to make an informed decision on what to do next. And hopefully that means with the arrow going down, we're back on our happy way and we're moving ahead, but we're doing it now with evidence. We're doing it with that evidence base to support the decisions that we have made. You know, that's what we think Argo might look like. But certainly from the focus study that Julia just presented on, the lenses that we must collect, because we collect a huge amount of data, we still have to put parameters around it. It has to be based on what students tell us about these spaces, what it's like to actually live in these spaces and use them. Doesn't mean we're not collecting evidence from outside of student experiences and opinions, we certainly are, but that's the key focus. And that has to do with how they learn, how they think these spaces help them to learn. We're talking about both the affective and effective ideas of learning outcomes, but also about that notion of engagement and participation. And the final one being inclusion, not the final one, the third one being inclusion and wellbeing. These are the lenses we feel that we need to really focus on in building Argo. So I'd like to talk to you for a minute about this development phase, because the scoping study gave us 4 reports. Each of them, you wouldn't put them down if you picked them up to start reading them. They're so captivating. And each of those 4 reports highlight a particular thing through that development phase. The final one was the white paper. And the white paper was a summary and a call for arms, that mandate in effect that you saw a minute ago. How are we now putting it into place? And with the second phase, the development phase, we retreated behind closed doors effectively. We still had a bunch of teams to work with, but we had to do a lot of it at the desk, doing a lot of analysis to try and work out what Argo should look like and how we should build it. Like any good project, any good piece of exploration, it's good to have a theoretical structure. In fact, you must have a theoretical structure to work from. Otherwise, it becomes a dog's breakfast. We felt that the notion of student participation and engagement in the classrooms was sort of the fulcrum for it. It's the central point. But I hate to say it, but we're really unhappy with the way that education traditionally has approached the idea of engagement. Nearly every study you read approaches it from the perspective of behavioural, cognitive and emotional engagement. And that works really well under circumstances, but not good enough for the scope, the huge scope of what Argo can do and is expected to do. We're extraordinarily fortunate in that we managed, once again, as we've often done in Learn, is to pinch ideas from outside our sector. The Applied Health have done far better work in looking at understanding the experiences of individuals than I think we probably have in education. A big call, I know, I'm sorry. But this is quite a sophisticated model. It's the one we've decided to use as our structure, our theoretical structure for Argo. I'll try and explain it quickly. It was designed actually for health science peoples to understand how do we get kids with all sorts of disabilities, how do we learn to understand what their life is like, and how do they participate in the exercise of daily living. And they said the reality is everyone lives in an environment. There's the blue bubble. And within that environment, though, all of us live within the environment in a particular context. No two of us are actually living in the environment in the same way. We've got all sorts of things that impact the context within which we live. And within the context, we actually have three things that happens. We participate, we attend, and we're involved. And the nice thing about that is this notion that actually just turning up doesn't mean you actually attend. That you can be there, but you don't necessarily do anything. What they've added to this is the person with that figure. And the person they bring to each experience, a kid in the school, in the classroom, brings to the experience their own preferences, things they like, things they want, etc. They bring to their learning environment exercises this notion of sense of self. Now, who am I? What are my values, my beliefs? What makes me a worthwhile person? And they also bring to the exercise individual ratings or individual ways, individual ranges of capacities. You know, I'm a really good artist. I'm not so good at maths. So that's one of my activity competences. And we're all like that in a really wide range of ways. So there's the basic structure of this theoretical construct. And this is called the family of participation-related constructs. Okay. And I'm very happy to send you the theoretical paper that underlines this. It was developed by a group in Jönköping University in Sweden, and a group in Toronto, Canchild, and a group in Australia at Melbourne University. So 3 different groups in applied health put this together and worked on it for years. They're just doing at the moment a citation index of the places it's been cited, which ranges at the moment into the thousands, but also they're pulling from that the places it's actually being used in studies, which is a few hundred. And they feel, because we've asked them to give feedback on, in fact, they help us develop what we're going to talk about next. But their feedback is, you know, that what we're doing in Argo is probably the most focused application of it outside of the applied health. The model is made up of the constructs listed on the left, and we don't need to go into those depths today, but they form the structure of how we're organising information from students across those different areas of environment, context, participation, engagement, etc. We pulled up those 7 or 8 categories and we put down their definitions in applied health of what it looks like. So just one example here. And we then spent a lot of time working with them and with our group and using the workshop groups we will talk about in a minute to actually come up with definitions from a spatial perspective. If that's the health perspective, the health application of that particular thing within this particular model, what would be the spatial one? And this took ages to do. And guess what? Nearly all of them at this level came directly out of the scoping study findings. Nearly all of them had, as we've got here, about 3 or 4 different examples of where it came up as one of the key themes or a sub-theme. And then we went on to make an example of what they would look like in terms of learning environment. That's the for example column. And finally, we came up with our preliminary items for our survey. Okay, then if that's what we want to find out about and focus on, then these are the questions that would address that. This, not surprising, took about a year to do, a lot of workshops and working backwards and forwards. But it has allowed us to come up with this, and this is the Argo tool in action. At the centre, definitely, is the survey, and the survey is built around that theoretical construct. But we have other things we have to have. The first one, we have to map environments. We can't collect students' experiences in schools unless we know what environments they're working within. What do they look like? And we know that there is absolutely no consistency whatsoever in the types of spaces kids work in. That you might have, we've got a lovely example in Western Australia, cookie cutter schools built, exactly the same design right down to the doorknobs, but every school has done different things with the furniture, different things, et cetera, et cetera. They have different educational programs put into it. So we need to be able to map that. We need to be able to tag any responses children give back to the environment and the characteristics of those environments. The one on the top right, the existing school data. Every school is different. Different socioeconomic backgrounds, different gender dispositions, different schooling types, from independent schools to public schools to specialist schools, etc. The bottom right is actually external data, because when we collect this data, we have to make it international. So we need to be able to say that these are the international benchmarks against which we can apply the data when it comes out. So in a minute, I'll show you how it might look in action. We can say these results are consistent across 5 countries, and these are the countries, bang, bang, bang. That sort of data can be done from number 4. The 5th one is the ideal that we'd love to be able to do, and we're still struggling with, which is external or effective learning outcomes. We've got affective learning outcomes. So effective learning outcomes, those things you can measure specifically, you know, numerical skills, literacy skills, etc., those sorts of things. And you would think that would be easy enough to do, but it's almost stymied us. However, we're still working on that. And we're very lucky, because on our scientific committee, we do have John Hattie, who's an expert in this sort of stuff. And even he's saying, oh, this is a tough one. But we have got we've got some of the effective learning outcomes coming out of the data that we're collecting from children about their perceptions. We've got a good subscale in that will work. But we're also looking at affective learning outcomes. So the 21st century learning skills, those things that are much harder to measure, and they're much more about the person, critical thinking, being collaborative, being creative in the way they work. So that's effectively the model that we're basing Argo on. So how do we think Argo is going to actually operate? It'll operate like this. You saw the model of the, this is the tool we go through, blah, blah. But let's get even more specific. Let's pretend that let's pretend I'm a principal. Sorry, I'm an architect. Here we go. I need evidence about which design characteristics have high levels of approval from students who experience limited physical mobilities. I'm designing a school, and I've been asked to make sure the school matches all kids' abilities, not just those who can get up and walk around, etc. What can Argo tell me, please? So using the tool, Argo would say something like this. From our data, we have 15 schools in 10 countries that have student ratings at or above 8 out of 10 in terms of accessibility. From our data, we can also give you comparison schools where the ratings are really low. It allows you to then look at the design characteristics between the two and work out for yourself the degree to which that happens. We can tell you what the 15 highly rated schools for accessibility, our LESA modelling, which is the mapping exercise, and we can talk about that another day, but it's quite a sophisticated online tablet application that a colleague is developing with us and for us. But it maps the actual environments within which all of this is happening. That our LESA modelling shows that these students consistently utilise these common design characteristics. We might tell them our attached report also gives you the LESA modelling that shows 6 design characteristics that are consistent with the lowest ratings in terms of accessibility. We can provide correlations between these accessibility favourable assets or characteristics of design with things like students' feeling about their well-being, feelings to do with inclusivity, etc., etc. It can get quite complex. The beauty of correlation analysis, it's a marvellous thing. We can also provide the approved contacts with 12 of the 15 schools out there rated highly, so you can talk to them about what they do and how they do it. I mean, this goes on. I won't go through the others because I've been given the 3-minute sign, so I better move it. But there's principles saying collaborative teaching. What design characteristics are shown through the evidence to be best to help teachers to collaborate together? And we would do the same again. We go through a whole bunch of findings, etc., like that would give them a whole range of data to be able to use to make their own solutions. School manufacturers, good old academics like a number of us in the room. I mean, imagine going to a data site that allows you to then sample particular characteristics and have the schools. So straight away, you know full well you've got yourself a good population to work with and you can sample from within. So to finish up, Argo, what's the progress to date? We've written a research protocol and ethics. And anybody who does this sort of work knows the huge amount of work in getting ethics for a program that's running across 20 countries. The research protocol is equally a bigger job. You know, how do we scientifically put together the research construct that's going to give us the data we need? Don't hold it up. I'll finish in a minute. Thanks. We have designed and piloted our tools. They're in the process of being piloted at the moment. And that's a huge job. You know, this is Julia's map of the people in the scoping study. And overlaid on that, these are the pilots that are being run at the moment. And again, through the extraordinary generosity of some people in this room and a whole bunch of countries around the world, where people are now going out and literally piloting this in, I think it's about 30 or 40 different schools in about 12 to 14 different countries. It's just to give us a really good range of data. So from that, we can test the organisational structure of putting Argo into action and collecting the data and populating all that data into Argo. It will give us a statistical validation of the tool to say, yes, it does hold up. It is actually doing the things statistically that it's supposed to do. It will give us a budget for that final phase, phase 3, of actually getting the information from the kids in schools, because we're expecting to go to about 500 schools around the world. And that has got obviously a high cost in terms of gathering that data. We'll get a budget, so then we can chase down the funding to do it. And of course, it's given us a lot of experience in not just localised ethics, because the ethics we get doesn't necessarily apply to ethics in other countries, but also added to this, you would say, also around a whole range of things to do with things like translation of the survey tools accurately. We're learning all that through this pilot study. Finally, it's a network. What we are managing to get through this whole process is perhaps one of the most extensive networks of people working on these topics around the world. So what's coming up next? We have to recruit for that third stage to actually collect the data. And we have to do it in a way where we can gather the money for cost recovery to be able to afford to send all those people out to collect all of that data, etc. And we're still working out how we're going to do that. We need to actually collect the tools, collect the data. We need to populate Argo. The structure of it will be done at the end of the pilot, but now we have to get that broad range of data into it to make it worthwhile. We have to move to embed localised projects within this. And by that we mean Argo won't do, an ILE+SE at the stands at the moment, won't do anything more than give people information. It's not actually a research project by itself. But what it does, it gives the information to create research projects. So, you know, Julia and I are writing up another large ARC research grant based on Argo, and people in different countries are going to use the data from Argo to then build their own localised projects. Argo gives us the what's out there, and it's these localised projects from Argo that are going to tell us the why. Why are these things happening? Finally, commercialisation. It's possible down the track Argo can be commercialised, so it self-funds to continue to grow. Overall, if phase 3 goes ahead, it's going to be quite something. But I think probably the most important part is that child there, that the data is coming from the kids actually living in these spaces and experiencing these spaces across a huge range of countries, across a huge range of variables. So we would like to thank the people who've already provided a huge amount of resources into this, physical resources and of course funding to get it to this stage. And we are looking very much to getting to the stage where we can move forward into phase 3 in the near future. So on behalf of Julia and myself, we co-lead the big ILE+SE project, because there is a really good management team of about 6 people working on this. We'd like to say thank you to you for having us and to listening to us talk about the project, and also for your ongoing support of it. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tina.